The moment had arrived, though no one outside Clarence's house could sense it yet. Behind the grand doors of the London palace, tensions were simmering, hidden from the prying eyes of the press, but felt palpably by everyone present. And in that very moment, history was about to take a dramatic turn, a move so unprecedented, so daring, that it would reverberate across royal circles and the globe alike. Princess Anne, the Queen's only daughter, had made a decision, one that would change Meghan Markle's life in ways she never anticipated. And Harry was caught in the middle. Imagine this. Harry, the prince who once seemed destined to carve his own path far from the scrutiny of the British monarchy, stepping back into the lion's den. Clarence's house, often a place of diplomacy, quiet strategy, and tradition, was now a stage for a drama that felt like it belonged in a Hollywood blockbuster rather than royal protocol. And there he was, walking the familiar hallways with measured steps, his face a mask of controlled emotion, while Meghan, miles away, waited anxiously for a call, a message, any signal that would hint at what was unfolding. Could she have guessed what was coming? Could anyone have anticipated the storm about to hit them both? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. In those first few seconds, the tension was almost unbearable. Security guards, trained to remain calm, whispered to each other with visible concern. Royal aides shifted nervously, aware that the decisions made today could have consequences far beyond the gilded walls. And then came the entrance that nobody could ignore, Princess Anne. Her demeanor was steady, composed, yet every inch of her posture screamed authority. She wasn't there to make friends. She wasn't there to negotiate. She was there to act. Why does this matter so much now? Because this is not just a story about a title. This is about power, perception, and the fragile balance within one of the world's most scrutinized families. When Princess Anne moves, people listen. When Anne decides, consequences follow. And Meghan Markle, who has spent years navigating the treacherous waters of public perception, social media judgment, and royal protocol, was suddenly face-to-face with a reality that no amount of planning or PR strategy could have prepared her for. Her reaction, once thought to be predictable, became the subject of whispers, speculation, and, eventually, global headlines. What did Harry feel in that moment? Was it relief, fear, guilt, or defiance? Perhaps all of the above. After all, he had returned to Clarence's house not merely to visit his father, but to engage in a delicate, high-stakes negotiation that balanced familial loyalty with marital allegiance. Every step he took, every word he spoke, had weight. And while Harry might have thought he was prepared for the challenges of confronting his father, he could not have foreseen the intervention of Princess Anne. Not like this. Anne's role in the royal family has always been unique. She has been described as fiercely loyal, deeply principled, and unafraid to speak her mind, even when it goes against the wishes of more senior family members. History has shown us that Anne rarely acts impulsively. Every public engagement, every statement, every decision is calculated with precision. So when word leaked, through the usual channels, carefully monitored yet inevitably prone to insider chatter, that Anne had taken the extraordinary step of stripping Meghan Markle of a royal title, the world was stunned. How could this happen? What could Meghan have done, or perhaps failed to do, to provoke such a decisive response? And more importantly, how would Harry respond? Let's step back for a moment. Clarence's house is more than just a residence. It's a symbol of continuity, a place where tradition meets diplomacy. It's where the Duke of Clarence, now King Charles, has conducted some of the most critical meetings of his reign. It's where history quietly unfolds behind closed doors. And it's here, in this hallowed space, that Harry confronted not just his father but the embodiment of the monarchy itself. The stakes were immeasurably high. Every glance, every gesture, every pause carried significance. And every observer, whether royal staff, distant relatives, or a global audience waiting for leaks, knew that today could mark a turning point in the modern monarchy. And Meghan. Her story has been one of constant scrutiny, often painted in extremes. Admirers call her brave, modern, a symbol of change. Critics call her manipulative, attention-seeking, a disruptor of tradition. But what we're about to explore isn't about opinion. It's about action and reaction, cause and effect. When Anne stripped Meghan of her title, it wasn't just symbolic. It was a statement. A statement about authority, responsibility, and the cost of crossing lines in a family whose every action is under the microscope. As the hours ticked by, rumors began to swirl. Leaked whispers of secret conversations, hurriedly deleted texts, and hurriedly muted video calls filled social media feeds. Royal commentators scrambled to decipher what had happened, while fans around the world debated every possible scenario. What had Meghan said or done to provoke such a response? Was it a single incident, or the culmination of years of tension? And how would this ripple through Harry's life, his work, his marriage, and his public image? But here's the real question that nobody dared ask out loud. What did this mean for the monarchy itself? Because this wasn't just about Meghan or Harry. This was about the public perception of the royal family. Every title, every privilege, every ceremonial role is carefully managed to maintain the image of stability and tradition. By stripping Meghan of her title, and had sent a message, not just to Meghan, but to the public, there are consequences for actions, and no one, not even a duchess married to a prince, is above them. And what about the timing? Why now? Why this moment? Because timing in the royal world is everything. Public perception is meticulously crafted, and the slightest misstep can spiral into scandal. By acting now, and ensured maximum impact. The media would report it, the public would react, and Meghan's reaction, so carefully monitored, so deeply scrutinized, would become a story of its own. It wasn't just an act of authority, it was a calculated move, designed to send shockwaves that could not be ignored. But let's not forget the human element. Titles and privileges aside, these are real people, with emotions, egos, and relationships tangled in decades of tradition. Harry, caught between loyalty to his wife and duty to his father, faced a dilemma that no training or preparation could have solved. Meghan, isolated yet empowered in her own right, had to navigate the fallout from a decision she neither anticipated nor could control. And Anne, she remained composed, her authority unquestioned, her intentions known only to herself and perhaps a few trusted aides. And so, as the first whispers of this unprecedented event reached the public, the world held its breath. Royal watchers speculated, social media erupted, and newspapers scrambled for the story that would dominate headlines for weeks. The question on everyone's mind was simple yet terrifying. What comes next? How will Meghan respond? Will Harry choose his wife, his father, or the crown? And in the shadows of Clarence House, was there a deeper strategy at play, one that might reshape the monarchy forever? But here's the thing. What we know is only part of the story. There are details, hidden conversations, and private actions that will not be revealed for weeks, months, perhaps even years. And within those secrets lies the true drama. Because when Anne made her move, she did more than strip a title. She disrupted a carefully balanced equation, forcing every player in this royal saga to reveal their hand. And what came next? Well, what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever walked into a room knowing that the air itself was charged with tension? That every glance, every whisper, every heartbeat carried weight far beyond what anyone outside could imagine? That was Clarence House on that fateful day. And the moment Harry stepped through its ornate doors, the room seemed to shift. Not because he had returned, but because everyone sensed something was about to happen that no one could predict. Something that would shake Meghan Markle's world to its core. The moment the door closed behind him, a hush fell over the aides and staff. Royal protocol dictated decorum, but human instinct doesn't always obey rules. There was a crackle of anticipation, electric, almost tangible. Harry, once the prince who seemed always in control, now had a subtle edge of uncertainty in his stride. He had prepared for this reunion with King Charles, rehearsed what he might say, anticipated every reaction, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the reality that awaited. King Charles, seated in his study, looked up from a pile of papers. His expression was calm, almost neutral, but those who know him intimately could see the tension coiled beneath the surface. He had been expecting this meeting for weeks, maybe months. After all, Harry had returned to England not merely for a family catch-up, but for a delicate negotiation that balanced personal loyalty, royal duty, and public image. And now here he was, face to face with his father, the weight of decades of family history pressing down on both of them. But it wasn't just Harry and Charles. Princess Anne was there, watching silently from the corner, her presence commanding attention without a single word. Unlike other family members, Anne didn't need to speak to be heard. Her authority radiated. Her gaze was sharp, assessing, almost predatory. She had come not merely to witness, but to act. And when Anne decides to act, the world listens. In that moment, Harry understood that nothing in his life, or Meghan's life, would ever be the same. So why wasn't even there? Why now? That question had everyone on edge. It wasn't customary for the Queen's daughter to intervene directly in matters involving a duchess married into the family. Yet, Anne had made a decision, calculated, precise, and unmistakably final. She was there to ensure that a line was drawn, a boundary established. And Meghan, miles away and unaware of the brewing storm, was about to be blindsided. The first words exchanged were measured, careful, each syllable loaded with meaning. Harry spoke of reconciliation, of family, of bridging the gap that had grown over the years. Charles responded with caution, reminding Harry of responsibilities, of duty, of the intricate dance of public perception. But the undercurrent was unmistakable. There was a storm coming. And in the eye of that storm stood, Anne, silent yet omnipresent, her gaze fixed on Harry with a mixture of judgment and expectation. Then, the moment arrived. Anne's voice, calm yet commanding, broke the fragile balance. "This cannot continue," she said. "The decisions made outside these walls have consequences inside them. Titles, privileges, recognition, they are not unconditional. They are earned. And in this instance, actions have necessitated a response." The words hit Harry like a physical blow. He had anticipated discussions, negotiations, even mild admonishments. But not this. Not a public, definitive statement that would ripple through the monarchy and beyond. Harry's mind raced. Every scenario he had rehearsed, every strategy he had considered, crumbled in an instant. He realized that Meghan's reaction, once he relayed this information, would not be simple. She had built her identity, her public image, her brand around certain assumptions. And now, one of the most stable pillars supporting her place in the royal family had been removed. Anne's intervention wasn't merely administrative. It was symbolic, powerful, irreversible. Imagine Meghan, reading the first leaked texts, the messages that inevitably found their way into the public sphere. A short, direct communication confirming that her title had been stripped. Not a warning, not a negotiation. A simple, undeniable fact. And with that, the world she had navigated so carefully. The world of influence, public perception, and royal privilege shifted beneath her feet. But the drama didn't stop there. What made this situation truly explosive was timing. Harry had just returned, attempting to reconcile with his father. The optics were critical. Publicly, this reunion was meant to signal healing, unity, a potential turning point in a story that had captivated audiences for years. Privately, it had become a battlefield. Anne's intervention ensured that the reunion would be remembered not for reconciliation, but for a dramatic, unprecedented royal maneuver. And what about Harry himself? He faced a choice. He could side with his father, attempt to mediate with Anne, or rush to Meghan's defense. Each option carried risks. Aligning too closely with Charles could alienate Meghan, potentially deepening rifts in their marriage. Standing firmly with Meghan risked the wrath of a family steeped in centuries of tradition, power, and scrutiny. Every move was consequential, every decision a potential headline. And in the back of his mind, Harry knew that the public would interpret his actions, correctly or incorrectly, as a reflection of loyalty, morality, and character. Meanwhile, Anne remained unflinching. She had calculated the ripple effects, anticipated every possible countermove, and prepared for every scenario. She understood the stakes better than anyone. Her decision to strip Meghan of her title was more than personal, it was strategic. It sent a message not just to Meghan or Harry, but to the world, that authority matters, that traditions are not to be undermined, and that the monarchy's image must be preserved, even if it means creating a storm in the process. Outside the walls of Clarence House, the story began to leak. Royal correspondents, ever vigilant, caught wind of the unprecedented move. Social media exploded. Fans and critics alike debated the implications, speculated on Meghan's response, and dissected every available piece of evidence. Was this the beginning of a public meltdown? Would Harry side with his wife or his father? Could the royal family survive the fallout from such a bold, direct action? The questions multiplied faster than anyone could answer, and the narrative spiraled into chaos, exactly as and had anticipated. And yet, amidst the drama and speculation, one truth remained undeniable. The dynamics within the royal family had shifted. Harry's return, intended as a moment of potential reconciliation, had inadvertently placed him at the epicenter of a storm orchestrated by one of the most formidable figures in the monarchy. And Meghan, miles away yet at the heart of the controversy, was left to confront the reality of her stripped title. Her reaction, the world would later discover, was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and calculated response. But in this moment, it was unknown, a cliffhanger that kept audiences worldwide on edge. So here's the question: when power, tradition, and personal relationships collide, what truly matters? The title, the perception, or the people themselves? Clarence House had become a stage for a high-stakes drama, and every observer knew that the story was far from over. What came next would not only redefine Meghan's place in the royal family, but also challenge Harry's loyalty, Charles's authority, and Anne's role as a guardian of tradition. And no one, absolutely no one, saw the final twist coming. Because what you're about to uncover goes beyond gossip, beyond speculation, beyond headlines. This is about strategy, influence, family loyalty, and the cost of ambition. And as the next chapter unfolds, you'll see how a single decision, made behind closed doors, can ignite a series of events so dramatic, so emotional, that the royal family, and the world watching, will never be the same. But just as Harry's mind raced, just as Meghan processed the news, just as and maintained her steely composure, a subtle yet pivotal event occurred in the background, a detail so minor, yet so consequential, that it would ultimately alter the trajectory of this entire saga. And what happened next? Well, what happened next would change everything, and no one, not even the most seasoned royal watchers, saw it coming. The phone buzzed. Twice. 3 times. Meghan Markle stared at it, frozen, her fingers hovering over the screen as though touching it might make the reality dissolve. She had been bracing herself for news from Harry, but not like this. Not a text, not an email, not a carefully worded note, but a definitive, undeniable confirmation. Her royal title had been stripped. Just like that. No warning. No discussion. Just a clean, final cut. The room around her seemed to shrink. The walls pressed closer. The bright California sunlight streaming through the windows became a harsh glare, exposing every corner of her carefully curated world. Meghan had lived under the microscope of the public eye for years, mastering the art of measured expressions, perfect social media announcements, and controlled reactions. But this was a different level. A level that required instinct, and instinct didn't come with training manuals. Her first thought was disbelief. No, this can't be real, she muttered. But deep down, she knew it was. Anne's authority was absolute. Her reputation, her history, her presence in the royal family. It was clear that when enacted, it wasn't done lightly. Meghan had navigated media storms before, but none had hit this close to the core of her identity. This wasn't a scandal over a charity event or a misunderstood comment at a gala. This was her title, her recognition, stripped away in a move that carried centuries of weight. She thought of Harry. He had returned to Clarence House seeking reconciliation, yet somehow, in a twist of fate, he had become the unwitting messenger of this seismic royal act. Meghan's thoughts raced. Had he known? Did he anticipate this? Could he have prevented it? And more importantly, what would he do now? Harry was caught in the middle, loyal to his father, loyal to his wife, yet trapped by centuries of protocol and expectation. And Meghan? She felt the world closing in, the stakes higher than ever. Within minutes, the news had leaked. Royal watchers, influencers, journalists, and social media armies exploded with speculation. Headlines flashed. And strips Meghan of title, royal rift deepens. Harry reunites with father as Meghan faces public fallout. Each headline was more dramatic than the last. Each social media post a mix of opinion, outrage, and conspiracy. And amidst it all, Meghan's own reaction became a story in itself. She had to decide, respond, ignore, or strategically maneuver. Her first instinct was private reflection. She walked through her home. The familiar space is now alien. Every photo, every piece of memorabilia, every carefully chosen detail seemed to mock her, a reminder of a world she had stepped into but never fully controlled. She felt the weight of public scrutiny pressing on her, yet she also recognized an opportunity. The world was watching, and how she responded would define her narrative moving forward. But Meghan wasn't alone in processing this. Her advisors, her closest friends, and even a handful of loyal staff scrambled to assess the fallout. Calls were made, messages sent, and contingency plans drafted. The goal was clear: protect Meghan's image, control the narrative, and prepare for the inevitable questions that would flood interviews, podcasts, and news segments. Every move had to be calculated, every word measured. Because in the world of royalty, and especially in the world Meghan had entered, perception was everything. Meanwhile, social media was a storm of speculation. Fans dissected every nuance, every historical precedent, every possible motive behind an unprecedented move. Some expressed outrage on Meghan's behalf, calling it an unfair act of tradition run amok. Others defended and, citing protocol, responsibility, and the sanctity of royal titles. And in the middle of it all, Harry's return to Clarence House added fuel to the fire. Public curiosity morphed into obsession. Every tweet, every Instagram post, every online forum became a battleground for opinion. But Meghan's reaction wasn't just a matter of optics. It was personal. Every title carries weight, not just in ceremony, but in influence, security, and legacy. Stripping her of her title didn't just remove recognition. It altered her position within the royal ecosystem, her access to certain privileges, and her symbolic role as a duchess. It was a clear message. Actions have consequences, and even a high-profile marriage to a prince couldn't insulate her from the rules. As the hours passed, Meghan moved from shock to strategy. She reached out to Harry, her voice measured yet urgent. "What happened? Why wasn't I warned? What are we going to do?" Harry, still processing the rapid-fire escalation at Clarence House, tried to reassure her. But even his composed demeanor couldn't hide the tension. They both knew this was more than a personal affront. It was a calculated move designed to shift power, perception, and narrative. And then came the public reaction. Paparazzi, always vigilant, caught glimpses of Meghan leaving her home later that day. Cameras clicked, reporters speculated, and hashtags trended. Some headlines suggested outrage. Others focused on the strategic brilliance of Anne's move. Every angle, every speculation, pushed Meghan further into the center of a storm she hadn't sought, but could no longer avoid. Friends and allies in the media reached out with advice, offering strategies for damage control. But Meghan realized something crucial. This was bigger than PR, bigger than headlines, bigger than social media. This was about legacy, perception, and influence. Stripping her of her title wasn't just an administrative act, it was a power play. And power, she knew, was rarely challenged without consequences. By the evening, the world was buzzing. News channels aired special segments analyzing the situation, royal commentators debated historical precedents, and online forums erupted with speculation. And through it all, Meghan's response was a masterclass in balance. Measured, strategic, yet unmistakably emotional. She didn't erupt in anger. She didn't beg for sympathy. She controlled her narrative, even in shock. And the world watched, captivated. But the most important twist was still unfolding behind the scenes. Because while the public focused on Meghan's reaction, the private maneuvers, conversations, strategies, and subtle messages were shaping a larger story. Harry was negotiating and was observing, and Charles was calculating his next move. Every decision would ripple outward, affecting not just the family but the global perception of the monarchy. And what came next? Well, it would push Meghan, Harry, and the royal family into uncharted territory, forcing choices that could redefine their futures forever. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, wind howling around you, debris flying, and the ground beneath your feet shifting with every passing second. Now imagine that storm isn't weather. It's family, legacy, loyalty, and love, all colliding at once. That was Harry's world in that moment. A perfect storm of conflicting loyalties that would challenge every instinct he had ever trusted. He had returned to Clarence's house, seeking reconciliation. A simple concept, or so he thought. Reuniting with his father, reconnecting with his past, bridging the chasm that had grown between them over years of misunderstandings, public scrutiny, and private heartbreak. But reconciliation, Harry quickly realized, was never simple. In fact, it had become a battlefield. And standing at the center of it was Meghan, thousands of miles away, but at the heart of every decision he would have to make. Harry's mind was a whirlwind. On one hand, there was loyalty to his father, King Charles. Blood, tradition, and history demanded respect. The monarchy was a living institution, centuries old, with rules, protocols, and expectations that transcended personal grievances. Ignoring that loyalty could bring scrutiny, criticism, and even the wrath of advisors who had guided the family for decades. On the other hand, there was love. Meghan had been his partner, confidant, and co-conspirator in navigating a world that was often unforgiving. Their marriage had been a union of hearts and strategy, a careful balancing act of personal happiness and public perception. And now, in this fraught moment, Harry had to consider her feelings, her reaction, and her future. Stripped of her title, Meghan was not just hurt. She was vulnerable, exposed to a storm that could engulf her both personally and publicly. Every step Harry took was measured. He had rehearsed conversations, anticipated questions, and mapped out potential outcomes. But none of that preparation could account for Anne's decisive move, the public leak, and the immediacy of Meghan's reaction. He was caught between two worlds, the world of duty, steeped in tradition and expectation, and the world of personal loyalty, where love and empathy demanded action. He thought back to conversations with his mother, Princess Diana, long gone but never truly absent from his mind. Diana had taught him about courage, about standing up for what you believed in, about balancing the heavy weight of royal expectation with the softer, human elements of love and compassion. And now, that lesson felt more critical than ever. He had to navigate this minefield not just for himself, but for the woman he loved, the family he had created, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. As he sat in the ornate study at Clarence's house, speaking with his father, Harry could feel the invisible currents pulling him in multiple directions. Charles spoke carefully, reminding him of responsibility, of history, of the delicate nature of public perception. Every word carried weight, every pause a potential trap. And Harry, trained by years of media scrutiny, royal etiquette, and personal experience, understood that one misstep could ignite a firestorm that might never be contained. Yet, his thoughts continually returned to Meghan. He knew her better than anyone. He knew how she would respond, how she would perceive delays or silence, and how a public slight, real or perceived, could become a personal wound. His loyalty to her demanded clarity, communication, and action, but his loyalty to his father demanded restraint, patience, and diplomacy. And in the middle of these competing demands, Harry felt a rare and unsettling uncertainty. Then came the text from Meghan. Short, pointed, and full of emotion. "I need to know you're on my side," it read. That simple sentence encapsulated the entire dilemma. She wasn't asking for explanations, strategies, or rationalizations. She was asking for allegiance, for loyalty. And Harry realized that his answer would define not just their marriage, but his place within the royal family, the public narrative, and history itself. The conversation with Charles continued, but Harry's attention was split. He nodded, responded, maintained composure, but internally, he was racing. What could he say? How could he navigate this without betraying one side or the other? Every potential solution seemed flawed, every compromise partial. And, quietly observing, remained a constant reminder that every move was being watched, measured, and judged. Outside, the world waited. Social media buzzed with speculation. Royal commentators debated what Harry's next move would be. Would he publicly defend Meghan, risk alienating his father, and ignite a media frenzy? Would he remain neutral, attempting diplomacy but appearing weak or indecisive? Or would he side with his father, betray his wife's trust, and face personal consequences that might haunt him forever? The stakes were astronomical, and the world knew it. Harry's mind raced through every possible outcome, every consequence, every ripple effect. He thought about Meghan's career, her public image, and the millions who followed every step of the royal saga. He thought about Charles, the weight of kingship, the pressure of public expectation, and the delicate balance of tradition. He thought about and calculating, precise and unyielding. And in that mental calculus, Harry realized that no decision would be purely right or wrong. Every choice carried risk, every path led to conflict, and every action would be scrutinized for years to come. In the midst of this, Harry made a choice. Not a final one, but a step toward resolution. He would communicate with Meghan immediately, provide reassurance, and begin crafting a strategy that balanced loyalty, love, and duty. But he also knew that his father's expectations, and authority, and the relentless gaze of the public were forces beyond control. And in that tension, Harry discovered a truth he had long known but rarely confronted so directly. Love and loyalty are often at odds, and navigating both requires courage, strategy, and sacrifice. And just as he prepared to leave Clarence House, a sudden, unexpected development changed everything. A confidential message arrived, a subtle note from an advisor, hinting at a revelation that would force Harry to reconsider everything he thought he knew about the situation, about Anne's intentions, and about Meghan's reaction. It was a twist no one saw coming, a pivot that would redefine the entire narrative. And as Harry read the words, his heart sank, not with fear, but with the realization that the next move could alter the course of the royal family forever. And Princess Royal has always been a figure shrouded in precision, discipline, and unyielding authority. While other members of the royal family bask in media attention, fan adoration, and scandal-driven headlines, and carved her influence through quiet, calculated action. She is not known for drama or public outbursts. She is known for results. And the moment she decided to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title, the world began to realize just how much weight those results carried. The decision wasn't impulsive. It wasn't fueled by emotion or momentary frustration, and analyzed, strategized, and anticipated the consequences. Her network of advisors, palace insiders, and legal minds had meticulously crafted a plan that would serve multiple purposes, assert authority, reinforce the sanctity of royal protocol, and send an unmistakable message to anyone who might underestimate her influence. Anne's motives were complex. On one level, there was the enforcement of tradition. Royal titles are not just honorary. They carry expectations, responsibilities, and a symbolic connection to the monarchy's legacy. By stripping Meghan of her title, Anne reminded everyone that privilege comes with accountability, and that no member, regardless of marriage or celebrity, was immune to the rules. But there was more beneath the surface. Anne's move was also strategic, aimed at recalibrating the balance of power within the family. Harry's return to Clarence House had unsettled the hierarchy. His presence, his intentions, and his loyalty were all variables in a delicate equation. By acting decisively, Anne reasserted her position as a stabilizing force, one who could influence both perception and outcome without needing public fanfare. The act of stripping a title is symbolic, but symbols carry enormous weight. In Anne's mind, every detail mattered. The timing of the announcement, the language used, the channels through which it would become public knowledge. This was not merely about Meghan. It was a statement about the monarchy itself. It said, authority exists, tradition matters, and boundaries cannot be ignored. Anne's precision extended to the psychological impact on Meghan. She understood that titles are intertwined with identity. Removing a title is more than a bureaucratic act. It is a profound challenge to personal legitimacy. And anticipated Meghan's reaction, predicting the mixture of shock, hurt, and strategic calculation that would follow. By understanding the human element, and ensured that her move would reverberate far beyond the walls of Clarence House, reaching global audiences in a way that headlines alone could not achieve. Inside Clarence House, Anne's team coordinated with the king's advisors, ensuring that the act was legally sound and publicly defensible. Historical precedents were reviewed, legal language scrutinized, and timing orchestrated to maximize impact while minimizing avenues for counteraction. Every detail was meticulously prepared because in the royal ecosystem, mistakes are amplified, missteps immortalized, and perceptions can become reality. The move also sent a subtle, yet unmistakable message to Harry. Loyalty is measured not just in words, but in alignment with protocol and respect for hierarchy, and knew that Harry's return created both opportunity and risk. By acting decisively, she reinforced the principle that while family bonds are personal, they are inseparable from the institutional responsibilities of royalty. This was not punitive, it was instructive. At the same time, and recognized the media dimension. Today, nothing is private. Every action is scrutinized, every pause dissected, and every motive questioned. The title strip would dominate headlines, trending across social media, and spark debate in traditional media outlets, and understood that controlling perception was as crucial as controlling action. By planning her move with precision, she positioned herself as the arbiter of both procedure and narrative. But the most calculated aspect of Anne's move was timing. She acted at a moment when Meghan was geographically distant, emotionally vulnerable, and already under public scrutiny. Harry's reunion with King Charles created a natural distraction, a focus for media attention and public speculation, allowing the action to land with maximum impact without immediate confrontation. It was a chess move, executed with the foresight of someone who understands that influence is measured not by reaction, but by ripple effect, and also considered the long-term implications. Removing Meghan's title was not just a corrective act, it was a precedent. Future members of the royal family would observe the consequences, internalize the boundaries, and adjust behavior accordingly. In a system that relies heavily on tradition, this ripple could influence decisions for decades, subtly shaping the culture and hierarchy of the monarchy. Yet, and strategy had an emotional component as well. She knew the story would captivate the public, evoke empathy, spark debate, and generate intrigue. By leveraging both legal authority and emotional resonance, and ensured the action would dominate conversation, not just in news cycles, but in personal discussions across the globe. This was power executed with elegance, visible but not ostentatious, decisive but not reckless. Inside her office, and reflected on the layers of impact, she considered how this move would affect Harry, Meghan, Charles, and even the broader perception of the royal family. She anticipated challenges, plotted contingencies, and mapped potential counteractions. But one thing was clear: the act itself was irreversible. Once executed, the consequences would unfold according to her design, whether accepted or contested. And as the first headlines appeared online and remained composed, the world would react, speculate, and analyze. Meghan would respond, Harry would navigate, and the monarchy would adjust. But, and had already calculated these outcomes. She knew that in the intricate dance of power, foresight and precision were far more valuable than emotion or public approval. Yet, even with all her calculation, there was one variable she could not fully control: the reaction of Meghan Markle. How Meghan would navigate personal grief, public scrutiny, and strategic decision-making remained uncertain. Would she retaliate publicly, withdraw entirely, or leverage the moment for personal narrative gain? And could anticipate, but not dictate human emotion, and that unpredictability introduced a tension that would ripple through the royal family and beyond. As evening fell, Clarence House remained a theater of quiet power. Anne's move had been executed with precision, the machinery of tradition and protocol seamlessly aligned. Outside, the media storm gathered momentum, Meghan's reaction rippled through social platforms, and Harry began the delicate task of balancing love and loyalty. And yet, behind the calm facade of royal authority, one truth lingered: even the most calculated moves can provoke consequences no one can fully foresee. Because what Anne had set in motion wasn't just the stripping of a title, it was a catalyst that would spark confrontation, negotiation, and revelation in ways that would shock both palace insiders and the global public. And the first shockwave had already begun to ripple outward. The moment the news broke, the world erupted. Social media feeds flooded with hashtags, trending topics, and relentless debate. Hashtag Meghan stripped, hashtag royal drama, hashtag princess and moves. These weren't just words on a screen. They were the digital manifestation of collective fascination, judgment, and outrage. For Meghan Markle, this was no longer just a personal attack. It was a public spectacle, A full-scale trial by social media where opinion replaced evidence and gossip masqueraded as fact. Every news outlet, from the BBC to global tabloids, raced to provide coverage. Analysts dissected Anne's decision, legal experts debated the ramifications, and commentators weighed in on Meghan's potential responses. Headlines screamed contradictions. Royal authority versus personal betrayal. Meghan stripped. Justice or cruelty? Anne's move sparks global debate. The sheer volume of coverage ensured that Meghan would not escape scrutiny, not for a single day, not for a single hour. In Los Angeles, Meghan's security team watched the rising storm with growing concern. The media frenzy was predictable, but the intensity surprised even the most experienced advisors. Journalists camped outside her residence. Paparazzi flashed cameras at every possible angle, and online trolls mobilized with relentless ferocity. Every tweet, every post, every comment fueled the frenzy. Every reaction was amplified, reshared, and dissected in real time. Meghan herself was caught in a vortex of conflicting emotions. Shock, anger, frustration, betrayal. Each emotion pressed against the next, forming a tension she could neither articulate fully nor release completely. She knew the stakes. She understood the optics. She had navigated media storms before, but this felt different. This wasn't just public criticism. It was an institutional statement. Princess Anne had acted not just as a family member, but as a symbol of authority. And Meghan felt the weight of that symbolism crush down on her. Her legal team immediately began drafting potential responses. Options ranged from private statements to public clarifications, from media silence to strategic interviews. Every decision had consequences. Speak too quickly, and she risked escalating the situation. Remain silent too long, and public perception could turn further against her. The calculus was intricate, delicate, and unforgiving. Meanwhile, in the UK, social media mirrored the frenzy. Royal fans, critics, and casual observers debated fiercely. Some praised Anne's decisiveness, framing it as a necessary enforcement of protocol. Others sympathized with Meghan, painting her as a victim of a rigid institution unwilling to adapt to modern realities. The debates were polarizing, often crossing into personal attacks, misinformation, and speculative narratives. Every comment thread became a microcosm of global division. The tabloids didn't just report, they manufactured spectacle. Headlines like Meghan's royal fall and Anne's ruthless move dominated front pages. Photographers scrutinized Meghan's every appearance, interpreting body language, wardrobe choices, and facial expressions as evidence of guilt, defiance, or emotional collapse. Analysts speculated on the ripple effects for Harry, Charles, and the broader royal hierarchy. In every frame, every word, every glance, Meghan's story was dissected, debated, and sensationalized. Even allies in Hollywood and social media circles weighed in, often unwittingly inflaming the situation. Comments from celebrities, influencers, and public figures were amplified, misinterpreted, and reshared in ways that Meghan could neither control nor counteract. The frenzy was now not just about royalty. It was about fame, power, and the global gaze, a spectacle that blurred the line between personal grievance and international headline. Inside Meghan's residence, tension mounted. Advisors recommended strategic silence, controlled interviews, and carefully crafted statements. Every phone call was logged, every social media platform monitored. Every day brought a new wave of commentary, a fresh angle, a renewed opportunity for misinterpretation. Meghan felt cornered, constrained, and under siege. A personal struggle transformed into a global drama. Yet, even amidst the chaos, Meghan understood the necessity of strategy. She could not react impulsively, could not allow emotion to dictate action. Her next move would define not just the public narrative, but the internal family dynamics, the perception of her role in the monarchy, and the relationship with her husband, Harry. Every calculated step mattered. One misstep could amplify scrutiny tenfold, while one clever maneuver could reclaim narrative control, at least partially. In parallel, Harry faced mounting pressure. Each news cycle reminded him of the consequences of his reunion with King Charles, of Anne's decisive action, and of Meghan's increasingly anxious position. Advisors counseled caution, legal teams monitored potential fallout, and public opinion added layers of complexity he could neither ignore nor control. Every step forward was a negotiation between loyalty, love, and optics, a tightrope walk above a pit of public scrutiny and institutional expectation. The palace press office began to respond subtly. Carefully worded statements, historical precedents, and indirect clarifications were released, all designed to shape perception without overt confrontation. The strategy was clear. Control the narrative by controlling the information flow, letting rumors rise and fall while maintaining an aura of authority and restraint. Anne's move was no longer just an action. It was a message, amplified and repeated through every available channel. Public reactions were equally intense. Social media polls, commentaries, and online debates reflected a global fascination. People debated moral and legal implications, speculated on hidden motives, and projected personal biases onto the unfolding drama. Meghan's every appearance, whether attending events, walking in public spaces, or simply being photographed, was scrutinized as evidence of guilt, defiance, or emotional turmoil. The frenzy became self-perpetuating, with each reaction fueling the next, creating a loop of perception and interpretation. Amidst this chaos, Meghan realized a stark truth. The media frenzy wasn't just about her. It was about power, symbolism, and perception. Every action by Anne, Charles, or Harry had a narrative effect, and every response by Meghan carried weight far beyond personal consequence. Her challenge was not just to navigate emotion, but to master narrative, public perception, and the subtle, often invisible power dynamics that underpin the monarchy itself. And then came the first tangible blow, a leaked internal communication, subtly suggesting that Meghan's response to Anne's action could influence upcoming legal and social consequences. This leak wasn't accidental. It was a calculated nudge, a signal from inside the royal network that her every move was being monitored, anticipated, and, potentially, countered. It was the kind of pressure that magnifies emotional strain, strategic calculation, and public attention all at once. Meghan knew the stakes had shifted. This was no longer a question of titles, privileges, or protocol. It was a full-scale battle of narrative, perception, and influence. Every decision mattered, every word could be weaponized, and every action could be scrutinized for months, even years. The media frenzy was relentless, but the real challenge was navigating its intersection with family dynamics, institutional expectation, and personal loyalty. As Meghan prepared to make her next move, she received a surprising communication from a close ally within the palace, a note suggesting that not all forces were aligned with and that there were potential cracks in the narrative, opportunities hidden within the frenzy. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it offered a glimmer of strategic advantage. And in that glimmer, Meghan found both hope and risk, the chance to reclaim control, but at a potential cost she had yet to calculate. The storm outside raged on, but inside, Meghan was already plotting the next wave. One thing was clear, the public outcry and media frenzy were just the beginning. The next chapter would not be defined by headlines alone. It would be defined by strategic moves, emotional resilience, and a confrontation that no one fully anticipated. The reunion between Harry and King Charles at Clarence House was not a casual visit. It was an event charged with history, emotion, and unspoken tension. As Harry entered the stately halls, the air seemed to thrum with the weight of expectation. This was more than a meeting between father and son. It was a confrontation between loyalty and autonomy, tradition and rebellion, past grievances and future possibilities. Every step Harry took was measured, deliberate, but inside, a storm raged. Charles, regal yet visibly anxious, greeted his son with a formality that masked years of unresolved tension. Their eyes met, one pair heavy with experience and burden, the other with determination and lingering resentment. It was a collision of worlds. The weight of monarchy pressing against the ideals of independence that Harry had fought so fiercely to protect. The negotiation was about more than titles or privileges. It was about legacy, authority, and the fragile bridge between personal love and institutional duty. From the outset, Harry's approach was cautious. He had returned to the UK under intense scrutiny, aware that every word, every gesture would be analyzed, recorded, and weaponized. Charles, for his part, was equally guarded, understanding that Harry's intentions could either mend or rupture fragile familial ties. The stakes were enormous. A successful negotiation could restore equilibrium, while a misstep could spark irreparable conflict, both within the family and in the court of public opinion. The discussion began with the obvious: the status of Meghan Markle, her role within the royal framework, and the recent actions taken by Princess Anne. Harry spoke with controlled intensity, emphasizing loyalty to family while defending his wife's position. Charles listened, absorbing the nuances, weighing implications, and silently cataloging potential concessions and boundaries. Each statement was a careful chess move, balancing emotion, protocol, and strategy. Harry's presence alone was a statement. His return signaled willingness to engage, but also carried unspoken demands. The air was thick with tension as father and son navigated topics ranging from public perception to private grievances. Discussions about Meghan's title, her interactions with palace staff, and her global influence unfolded like a delicate negotiation, where words could heal or wound, and silence could speak louder than any statement. Charles, known for his diplomatic acumen, employed a strategy that combined firmness with subtle empathy. He acknowledged Harry's grievances, but consistently framed the conversation within the parameters of tradition and responsibility. Titles, privileges, and royal duties were not merely ceremonial. They were contracts of loyalty, commitment, and expectation. By emphasizing these points, Charles aimed to guide Harry toward understanding the institutional stakes, while leaving room for personal reconciliation. But Harry was not unprepared. Years of living under public scrutiny had sharpened his awareness, strategy, and rhetorical skill. He presented his case with clarity, blending emotion with logic, personal anecdote with broader implications. Every argument he made was designed to resonate both with his father and, indirectly, with the public narrative. He knew that the success of this negotiation depended not just on persuasion, but on demonstrating balance, assertiveness without aggression, loyalty without submission. The tension escalated when the topic shifted to Meghan's reaction. Harry's words were measured but pointed. Anne's decision to strip Meghan's title had ignited a media storm, placing both Harry and his wife under relentless scrutiny. Charles responded by highlighting the necessity of protocol and precedent, emphasizing that individual emotion could not override the enduring framework of the monarchy. Their dialogue teetered on a knife edge, balancing familial affection against institutional obligation, personal grievance against historical duty. Throughout the negotiation, subtle psychological dynamics played out. Harry was aware of every inflection, pause, and gaze. Charles observed every gesture, choice of words, and emotional undertone. In that room, power was measured not in volume, but in control of narrative, perception, and emotional equilibrium. Each participant understood the consequences of miscalculation. A single misstep could destabilize relationships, reignite public controversy, and potentially influence succession politics. Midway through the meeting, an unexpected revelation altered the tone. Charles disclosed internal communications suggesting that Meghan had contemplated a public response that could escalate media coverage further. Harry absorbed the implications immediately. This knowledge added urgency, forcing him to consider both defensive and proactive strategies. Any response had to navigate public perception, institutional expectation, and personal integrity, a tripartite challenge of immense complexity. The discussion also touched on legal considerations. Advisors present, though silent, monitored every exchange, assessing potential implications for titles, privileges, and international perception. Harry and Charles debated not just what should happen, but what could be enforced legally. Precedent, interpretation, and historical context were invoked to provide legitimacy, while each side simultaneously weighed the optics of transparency versus strategic ambiguity. As the hours progressed, the conversation evolved from transactional negotiation to a subtle, emotional reckoning. Harry confronted past grievances, including his feelings of marginalization and public vilification. Charles expressed regret for missteps, yet maintained his stance on tradition and protocol. In those moments, father and son navigated a complex emotional landscape where apology, acknowledgement, and mutual understanding had to coexist with unwavering principles. Yet, even with progress, the negotiation revealed fractures. Harry sensed that Charles, while empathetic, remained aligned with Anne's perspective. The title strip, though discussed diplomatically, represented an unyielding boundary. For Harry, this underscored the persistent tension between familial loyalty and institutional expectation. The realization added weight to the conversation. Reconciliation would require not just dialogue, but compromise, strategy, and acceptance of uncomfortable truths. By the end of the meeting, a tentative framework had been established. Agreements on public communication, private family dynamics, and strategic coordination with legal advisors were outlined. Yet, both Harry and Charles knew that the true test lay beyond the walls of Clarence House. Media, public opinion, and Meghan's response would all influence the next phase of negotiation, introducing variables that neither father nor son could fully predict. The reunion had achieved its immediate goal: engagement, dialogue, and preliminary alignment. But it had also exposed vulnerabilities, highlighted tensions, and underscored the enduring complexity of royal relationships. The negotiation was not a resolution. It was a starting point, a delicate calibration of power, loyalty, and perception. As Harry left Clarence House, he understood the gravity of the next steps. Meghan awaited his report, advisors were poised with recommendations, and the world, already abuzz with headlines, was watching every move. The negotiation behind closed doors had concluded, but the ripple effects were only beginning to unfold. And within those ripples lay the next storm, one that promised to challenge, provoke, and redefine every relationship connected to the monarchy. Because what Harry and Charles had negotiated privately was only the beginning. The real confrontation, public, emotional, and strategically unpredictable, was waiting to explode. While Harry's negotiations with King Charles concluded behind the ornate doors of Clarence House, Meghan Markle was already charting her next move. The world saw headlines, photos, and fleeting glimpses of her calm exterior, but beneath that composed veneer, a silent storm was brewing. Meghan knew that in the game of royal optics, silence could be as powerful as speech, and patience as devastating as confrontation. She had spent years mastering this duality, appearing serene while orchestrating outcomes behind the scenes. From the moment news broke about Princess and stripping her royal title, Meghan retreated not in fear, but in calculation. Every media report, every social media trend, every journalist's speculative paragraph became a tool in her mental map of influence. She began analyzing the narrative. Who was framing the story, what angles were trending, which outlets leaned in her favor, and which were eager to turn public perception against her. This wasn't paranoia, it was precision. Meghan's inner circle became a hive of strategic planning. Advisors, legal experts, and media consultants convened in emergency sessions, dissecting the implications of Anne's unprecedented move. Each scenario was assessed: public statement, controlled leak, media blackout, or a subtle strategic push through social channels. Every option carried weight. Miscalculation could ignite further scrutiny, but the right move could recalibrate public perception and send a calculated message to both the monarchy and the world. Meghan's initial instinct was to silence. She would not react impulsively. The headlines could wait. Instead, she focused on long-term impact, how to protect her personal narrative, how to maintain her family's privacy, and how to leverage influence without appearing defensive or combative. In Meghan's mind, power was exercised not by shouting into the void, but by shaping the conversation subtly, strategically, and with foresight. Her team suggested multiple courses of action. One plan involved a public statement emphasizing personal humility and dedication to charity work, framing the stripping of her title as a personal challenge she would rise above. Another strategy leaned into the media frenzy, leaking selective insights to trusted journalists, creating suspense and redirecting the narrative to focus on Harry's reunion with Charles rather than her own perceived failings. Meghan considered both, weighing risks and potential gains, understanding that timing was everything. But Meghan's mind went further. She understood the ripple effect this moment could have on her influence, on her public brand, and on the perception of her husband's role in the monarchy. Harry had emerged from Clarence House in a tentative truce, but the world would see only fragments of that private discussion. Meghan knew that if she acted carefully, she could not only protect herself, but also subtly assert power in a space traditionally dominated by others. She also considered the psychological aspect. Anne's decision, while formal, carried symbolic weight, authority exercised with icy precision. Meghan realized that any overt response might appear reactive, emotional, or desperate, exactly the perception the palace hoped to cement. Instead, Meghan focused on controlling the optics without revealing the mechanics of her planning. Every post, every public appearance, every interaction would be calibrated, a chessboard of perception designed to maintain dignity while signaling influence. Amidst this, Meghan's thoughts inevitably turned to Harry. She knew that the tension between her husband and his father would affect the broader family narrative. Harry's support was a critical variable, and ensuring alignment required subtle communication, strategic signaling, and emotional intelligence. Meghan reached out through carefully mediated channels, ensuring that Harry understood her perspective, her strategy, and her priorities. Every message was deliberate, measured, and designed to reinforce both unity and autonomy. Meghan also turned her attention to the public's perception of Anne's actions. Social media, often a chaotic arena, could be harnessed. She began crafting narratives that highlighted inconsistencies, questioned motives subtly, and humanized her own position without overt confrontation. Each calculated insight, shared anonymously or through trusted intermediaries, began to reshape discourse. Meghan was no longer merely a subject of palace action. She was a participant, a strategist, and a player with influence beyond titles. The legal dimension was equally critical. Meghan's team evaluated precedent, assessing how Anne's decision could be challenged, mitigated, or reframed. Legal counsel advised patience. Any overt legal action could escalate media frenzy, but also prepared contingency plans should public perception demand formal intervention. Meghan understood that law and narrative were intertwined. A well-timed legal posture could reinforce public positioning without the spectacle of courtroom drama. But Meghan's most daring strategy was psychological. She knew that perception was as vital as action. By controlling when, how, and through whom information flowed, she could subtly shift the power balance. Allies in media and celebrity circles became conduits, channels through which selective insights reinforced her position. Public sympathy, strategic ambiguity, and well-timed revelations became tools as potent as any title or privilege